Okay, good morning everybody. I think this is working well. I'm remote, so hopefully everything's going to go smoothly. 1/7/21. So only about a week, you guys. Only about a week left and we're done. So hopefully everybody's doing well and in good shape. If you're missing some stuff, you better get it in. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a real quick review. We have learned that the sine of an angle is a ratio of its opposite side over its hypotenuse, and the cosine of an angle is equal to its adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and that the tangent of an angle is equal to its opposite side over its adjacent side. Okay, and of course, in order to get these names, you have to stand at an angle. Okay, now today is different. What makes it so different is that we don't know an angle, but we can find the angle. So this button, the inverse button, is the one we really want to look at. So today we want to look at, instead of sine, we're going to look at sine inverse. Instead of cosine, cosine inverse. Instead of tangent, we're going to look at tangent inverse. Okay? And it's going to be sine inverse of the opposite of the hypotenuse, cosine inverse of the adjacent of the hypotenuse, and tangent inverse of the opposite over the adjacent. Now, so this is our angle button, okay? This is our angle button. To find an angle, we have to use this button, okay? So on my calculator, there it is. There's my sine inverse, my cosine inverse, and my tangent inverse. Okay, so for instance, if I did sine inverse of 0.5, I'll get an angle. I'll get an angle. Boom. 30 degrees. If I did cosine of, cosine inverse, right? And for some of you guys might be a second inverse of 0.5, right? I get a 60-degree angle, okay? If I did tangent inverse of, say, 0.5, I get an angle, 26.5. Those are angles, all right? So anytime we need to find an angle, we will use the inverse button, always. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem. We don't know either angle. I know the 90, but I don't know P or I. So I can pick either angle, either P or either angle I to solve for. So, I don't know, it does not matter. I'm going to take angle P just because it's right there, okay? So by choosing angle P to be the angle I want to work with, then what we've done is we've established our names. So from angle P, this is my opposite side, and of course the 14 is my hypotenuse, right? So if I'm working with my opposite and hypotenuse, those are the two sides I know, I look at my ratios. Opposite hypotenuse has got to be, in this case, my sine, okay? Opposite hypotenuse is the only one of the ratios that does that. So let's see if we can find the measure of angle P. So let's set it up. So we're going to go sine of theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, right? Because that's what we know. We know the opposite side is 10, and we know the hypotenuse is 14. We don't know anything about the adjacent side, nothing. The adjacent side is just clueless, so let's leave it alone. We don't care about the adjacent side. Well, if we use this ratio, we're going to have to find the angle. So I'm going to have to go to sine inverse. Okay, that's the symbol. Some of you on your calc, it's the second button, and we'll talk about that in Zoom. So sine inverse of, you ready? We're going to do the opposite, which is my 10 over my hypotenuse, which is 14. And I'm going to put that in my calculator just like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go sine inverse. You've got to have the little -1. Has to have the little -1. Has to. Otherwise you won't find the angle of 10 divided by 14. And we get an angle. About 45.6. Let's round to the nearest tenth. Nearest tenth, okay? So I'm going to say it's a 45.6 degrees. So theta is about 45.6 degrees, but of course that's angle P. Right? Good. Now if we want to find angle I, that's pretty easy, because if I know this angle is a 45.6, these two angles are complementary, which means they add up to 90. So to find angle I, we'll just go 90 degrees minus my 45.6 degrees, and we'll just go ahead and do that real quickly. 90 minus 45.6, and I get an answer of 44.4. Okay, now, lastly, if we want to find the adjacent side, let's just use Pythagoras' theorem. That's easiest. So we would go little I squared plus 10 squared equals 14 squared, right? Pythagoras' theorem. Leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. You can call it ABC, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, but you know, it's not A's and B's. So I'm going to go I squared is equal to 14 squared minus 10 squared. And I can just do that on my calculator, right? Pretty easy. 14 squared minus 10 squared, that is 96. So I got I squared equals 96. And of course, then we'll take the square root of both sides because we have to find I. So do the square root of 96 and I get an answer of about 9.8. Okay, that's not a degree, that's a side. That's side length, maybe in centimeters. Okay, and let's take a look at the next page. So the next page, again, talks about solving triangle PIG. So I'll do one more of these so you get the hang of it, okay? So the first thing I have to do is decide which of the two angles I want to solve for. It doesn't really matter. Let's take angle I, call that my theta, okay? Once we've established our angle, then the sides have names. Well, all the way across the lake, that's my opposite side. I don't really care about it because I don't know anything, so I don't really need my opposite side. But the 12 is next to me, and that's my adjacent side. And the 16, being opposite the 90, is my hypotenuse. Okay, so now this time I want to use adjacent hypotenuse. Let's use cosine. Okay, so I'm going to set up cosine of theta equals my adjacent of my hypotenuse. Okay, so I will go cosine inverse because I want to find the angle. I want to find the angle, so I must use the inverse button, okay? Have to use the inverse button, okay? Of my adjacent side, which is 12, over the hypotenuse, which is 16, and that's going to give me my angle, all right? Just do it on my calculator. So I go cosine inverse, okay? Has to have the little -1. Must have that cosine inverse of 12 divided by 16. And I get an answer of about 41.4. So my angle I, the measured angle I, is about 41.4. Okay, angle P, it's pretty easy. Angle P is just going to be 90 minus this 41.4, and that's going to be angle P. Okay. Makes about a 48.6 degrees. Okay, that's angle P. And then finally, if I wanted to find this other side, my opposite side, I'd go a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but how about little I squared plus 12 squared equals 16 squared, okay? Minus 12 squared minus 12 squared. Okay, so what is 16 squared minus 12 squared? 112. And of course, I have to take the square root of that to get I. So I'll use my calculator. I'll go the square root. 112. I get an answer of about 10.6, 10.58. 10.58 centimeters. Okay, hopefully you're catching on. So if you want to find an angle, you must use the inverse symbol. Example 6. Let's take a look at it. Okay, a wheelchair ramp is built with a height of 8 inches and a ramp length of 54 inches. Okay, so that would look something like this. 8 inches. Here's my ramp, right? My ramp is 54 inches. So technically, if I looked at it as a right triangle, of course this is ground, but you could have a right angle here. And then there's an angle here. How steep, or what's the angle of elevation of this angle? Well, code is 4.8 degrees or less. That's code. That's code. If we're less than 4.8, we're okay. If we're more than 4.8, better rebuild it. So, let's see if we can find this angle. So from my angle, the 8 is my opposite side, right? Directly opposite the lake. And then my 54 is opposite the 90. My ramp is the hypotenuse. You will have a problem like this on your test. So pay attention. So opposite hypotenuse, opposite hypotenuse, opposite hypotenuse. Seems like it's got to be sine again, right? So I'm going to go sine of theta is equal to my opposite of over my hypotenuse, which is my 8 over 54, right? Opposite over hypotenuse. Now, we got to use the inverse button because we need to find the angle. So we got to use sine inverse. You have to. If you want to find an angle, you have to use that inverse button. Have to. Okay, of 8 over 54. I'll put that in my calculator. I'm going to go sine inverse. Okay, so I'm going to go sine inverse, right? Got to have that little negative sign of 8 divided by 54, and I get an answer of about 8.52. 8.52. No way, Granny's not going to get up. That's too steep. No! No, we're out of code. Rebuild it. You better make this a lot smaller, and then you can make it work. Okay, that's all I have. We will zoom on this, and hopefully everybody will do well.